Hi, welcome to Finding Genius. My name is Kyle O'Brien, founder of Startup ROI, operating partner at Revia. Ying Shao from Plantik is here with us today. Welcome, Ying.
Hi, Kyle. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you and I met actually a few months back, so this is our second conversation, but I'm looking forward to seeing how things have progressed at Plantik. But maybe for the audience, you can kick it off with a little about your background. How did you get into the space you're in today around genetic modification of plants?
Okay, that's gonna be a long story. I will try to make it short. I'm originally from China, and I came to Europe to pursue my higher studies about 10 years ago. I studied business. One part was because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, as a young person at that point, and I felt that I mean the school was really good in France, and I felt that there could be more opportunities, that come after the school and open up kind of what could be my options later on. And I first started my career in kind of big companies, industries that are quite famous and dear to France, I would say, in, for example, consumer goods, cosmetics, luxury, creative culture as well. I explored around to see what I really like, what I'm good at.
Sure.
There was always this entrepreneurial kind of spark in me, I would say. Back then, when I graduated, it was not really easy to go that route, and that there were not a lot of startups yet, especially in France back then. I was lucky to get into a startup that was funded by the LVMH group back then. And it was in creative culture. We were kind of exploring what now seems to be very common with short videos and all that. And we were trying to explore new business models around creative short videos to collaborate with brands. So somebody the other day said it was kind of TikTok before TikTok. I think the format is a little bit different. So we were more polished and really with young creators to create a format,
Okay.
but that was that. And I worked on lots of different things because it was a young startup. And my last role was to develop the market in China, try to see if with the creative content we had, we could try to establish a business as well in China. And we exited the business 4 years after to actually a big Chinese publishing group that wanted to digitalize at that point. And then from that point on, I joined another French startup to see the scale up phase of a company, which interested me a lot as well. I've seen kind of the small structure starting point,
Sure.
and then went into a French startup that raised quite some funding and was going to scale up in the consumer market with a technological consumer product to go. And from there, so I witnessed a little bit the scale up points, kind of the challenges faced, especially from an organizational point of view. And then
Hmm.
I decided it was time for me to try my entrepreneurial dream since a long time.
Yeah.
Um, Before that, I already started a very small venture with some friends in kind of import export of some medical cosmetics products. It was making some profit, but it was still small scale. And I realized at that point that I wanted to create a venture, first of all, at a personal level, to have more of a positive impact, to say, or just to give my personal work a little bit more meaning than what I had before. And that was important to me. And then I think I realized that the venture needs to have a deep technological advantage in the long term, so that we will not be so dependent, for example, on cash injections to keep having users, or in some models that are quite popular at that point. So deep technology was kind of the direction I oriented myself a little bit to at that point, and also because my last company at that point was also quite in deep technology, even though the product was more consumer facing.
Right.
Um, so I was very lucky to be selected by the program Entrepreneur First at that point, which really facilitates the meeting before people who want to start a company.
Okay. I was sorry to interrupt. I was asking entrepreneur first. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how the program works? It's a unique model for kind
Yeah.
of incubating startups.
Yes. So the program was launched already, I think, more than 10 years ago in the UK first. And the idea is really to provide a different track, a different possibility for people who wanted to, do something in the world other than just joining big corporations. That was really almost the only road for especially business graduates to do things, and for also people who have deep technology, scientists or engineers, to have a way instead of just working in an academic lab or working in a big company, to have another possibility and create something that could potentially have a big influence in the world. And the program was really about, making it possible for people who want to maybe start a venture to meet a co-founder, because creating a company is very hard, and you also need complementary skills to do it well. So I think the program, the biggest advantage is really to take out the question around timing, because sometimes you can meet a really talented person who might want to start a company at some point in their life. But the problem is timing. Is it right now that we can try something together, or is it in 5 years and then things might change in each other's life? So I think that the program for me, the best thing is to meet a co-founder, which I really wanted. I didn't want to do it alone. And the type of venture I wanted to create, I couldn't do it alone, or I couldn't do it with another business grad, for example.
Right,
So I
right.
needed to meet a technical co-founder who is ready also to start a startup that is deep technological, and to do it for the long run. So there we basically, we were selected group of individuals who have different backgrounds, from science to engineering to business, most of the time. And the program has this methodology to try to see if co-founding teams can be created and business ideas could be generated during the program. And it's very, very intense. It's like an intense professional dating
Sure, yeah.
process, and we encourage you a lot to get together and try something. And if it doesn't work, we also encourage you to break up, which mentally is also quite challenging, because even if you only work with somebody for a week or 3 weeks, you start to get this connection. And sometimes,
Right,
just as in any relationship, it starts to be difficult for you to say, oh, actually maybe we just stop here. It's hard
sure.
decisions.
Yeah, yeah.
But anyways, the program really gives you kind of a methodology to try to see if the other person is a co-founder, try to see if you can find viable business ideas to start a deep technological startup. And me and my co-founder Aditya, we met through the program, and we really started building the ideas through the program as well.
Gotcha.
Mm.
Awesome. Well, I loved it that you were founded at EF. I mean, I've heard a lot about the program, and there's a lot of amazing success stories from there. So hopefully, 5 years time from now, we'll look back and say the same thing about Plantik. I want to talk a little bit about Plantik, like where did the idea come from? I seem
Hmm.
to recall your co-founder is more on the biology
Yes,
side of
exactly.
things, and you're
Mm.
running the business development. So can you talk about how you guys came up with the idea and maybe the general value proposition? What is the core mission of Plantik?
Yeah, exactly. So when I met Aditya, my co-founder, it was kind of the time that biotechnology, especially synthetic biology, starts to get more and more attention, whether it's in academia or also just in general media. So I myself heard about new techniques such as genome editing, especially in the context of human gene therapy to cure heart diseases that especially come from genetic mutations, for example. And so I had some notions, and it seemed almost a science fiction at that point to me. But when I met Aditya, I realized that the technique, well, one part is that it's quite young in terms of application in industries, and then the possibilities are just immense
Mm,
in terms of where we can apply this type of technologies to. And Aditya is specialized really in plant sciences as a molecular biologist, and at that point when we met, he had an interesting discovery, a menu one, that he discovered specific locations in the genome of his plants that basically made the plant much more stable when it grows in much higher temperature. So very quickly, obviously, his research was on the impact of climate change, especially extreme weathers and temperatures, and on plants. And from there, he obtained this plant that managed to maintain production with a 5-degree temperature increase, which is a lot for plants. Most plants, they stop producing at, with a 3-degree temperature increase, just as a mechanism to protect themselves. And so he obtained a plant that survived, not only survived, but maintained production with a higher temperature, and also developed roots that can tap into water in case of droughts. So roots that are actually much longer and stronger compared to the original plant. So from there, we realized very quickly that this could have a lot of meaning for climate change and what could happen with tomorrow's plants, that we need to adapt them to different climates and different environmental kind of threats. But another thing is we realized that this was one singular discovery that he had. Can we make this type of discovery more systematic? Can we build systems and tools so that we can be able to influence traits and create tomorrow's plants in a much more accelerated way using those new techniques? And so the Plantik idea really came from there. We wanted to influence plant breeding and how plant breeding will be done tomorrow, so that we can create tools to facilitate and accelerate the creation of new plants, whether it's for fighting harsh weathers, climate change, or it's for food, or it's for creating plants so that we have new biomaterials tomorrow, or medicine, anything. We really think that today we are kind of coding softwares, but tomorrow we will be coding live organisms because we can, because we need to, and because there's so much that we can do with it to drive impact tomorrow. So this is fundamentally what we wanted to do, and we want to create tools that yesterday office workers, they had Microsoft Office, and that made everything easier, and we want to build such tools so that plant engineers tomorrow, this is the category that we are addressing, plant engineers tomorrow, whatever purpose they're creating their plants for, they can have the appropriate tools to make their job easier and more effective.
Yeah, it really does sound like science fiction, but it is incredibly fascinating and timely, I would say, around the climate change issue. Climate change is a popular subject, especially among the tech crowd. I saw a big venture capitalist, John Doerr in California, just sponsored a climate change or sustainability school at Stanford. ESG has become incorporated into most venture funds. So clearly the urgency, the sense of urgency is there, but for the average person, this feels like a problem that is 20, 30 years out. Obviously, for anyone clued in, we realize that the time to make a change is now. I think one of the stats that you highlighted to me earlier that I found pretty startling was that something like 75% of the food production in the world comes from 12 varieties of plants, which means there's not a single point of failure, but a relatively small coverage there. So can you talk about the state of the world today and the risk that it poses, our lack of biodiversity poses?
Yes, definitely. So as you said, today we're facing this systematic failure in terms of diversity. And the reason being that, well, we went into industrialization for everything in the past, 50, 100 years. And we needed everything to be streamlined and super efficient. And this is why more diversity complicates things. That's natural. And in terms of industrial process we want everything just to be, the same and as simple as possible. So today, as you were mentioning, in terms of food, we are highly dependent on a dozen crops. Actually, 12 of them provide 75% of food that we consume today, which when we think about it, seems unthinkable. But yeah, it is the state today, and we have to think that if we live in relatively rich countries, developed countries, we have more choices. But if we look at a bigger picture in the world, yes, most of the things we consume are really not diversified. And the problem there is not just nutritional, obviously, it is as well. But the first threat there is, if we talk about resilience, there's no resilience if there's no diversity. So to reduce our dependency on our choices of food, for example, is something really essential. And I think today we have seen this even more aggravated with the situation, for example, of war between Russia and Ukraine. And we all of a sudden realize that we are so dependent on those two states for the production of wheat, for the production of certain types of oil. And I think locally countries will start to realize this more and more and try to be more dependent in terms of what we produce for food and other things as well. We have to realize that plants are a big source of food, but plants are everywhere in our life, and the entire plant-based consumption today, in terms of source, is very, very limited. I can give another example. So today we want to try to look for other sources of energy. Plant biomass is already used at a very high percentage, especially in developing countries, as a source of renewable energy. For example, in India, I think the percentage of plant biomass as a source of renewable energy goes somewhere to already between 30 and 40%, which is really high. And tomorrow we are in a situation where energy becomes, we're more demanding and for energy, but the source of a classic source of energy starts to reduce significantly, and we need to look for more ways to get energy. And this is also why, in terms of bio based energy tomorrow, whether it's for a fuel or other sources, I think we also need to diversify, what we can use as a source to provide those energy. Medicine is another example. Most people don't realize, but actually today, a lot of the medicine, like 25% of active ingredients in the medicines that we use in the West, actually come from plants. We synthesize a lot, but the other track, that is more plant-based, has never disappeared. And there's really a trend now to look for what other therapies we can get from a more kind of natural source, and try to provide cures for people that are maybe less aggressive in a lot of cases. So there, our plant-based consumption, again, it needs diversity. It is a must that we need to do it, because we're dependent on certain things, and it creates threats. But it is also, I think, in terms of where our society is going, where our economy is going, this diversity is also a demand coming from consumers. Whether it's for diversifying our food, nutrition, or our medicine, or the biosources for energy, and so on. So this is where we think plant engineering, just as other forms of bioengineering, will really create a lot of impact, change ways we do things, in the decades to come, and it's going to profoundly shape how our economy and society will be in the decades to come.
The outcome there, which is plant biodiversity, I think is very noble, and from a marketing standpoint, easy to get people's head around. People understand the value proposition there. The process to get to that outcome, however, is a little bit more complex. And so, I'm from the U.S., and I think we're probably the leader in genetically modified plants and industrial farming, and it has a pretty bad reputation. You guys specialize more on kind of the CRISPR gene editing side. But
Mm,
for those who aren't experts, it's pretty easy to conflate the two, the
of course.
GMOs versus gene editing. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, and demystify that perhaps. What are the differences between the two, and why is CRISPR a better and more sustainable technique
Mm, mm.
for plant modification in the future?
Yeah, definitely. So we have to understand that genetically modified organisms, this is a legal definition to start with, which means
Hmm.
under different jurisdictions, there could be different definitions, but the most used ones are that when you insert an element that is not native to the organism that you're trying to change. This is mostly the case. For example, we take a gene from a bacteria or jellyfish sometimes because there are properties that we're looking for example, for fighting certain disease or, making the plant or the animal more resilient to certain conditions. So you take that kind of foreign piece of genetic element and then you mix it with the organism that you are trying to influence. This kind of mutation or change does not occur naturally. You cannot find this type of change in nature, and this is the key definition of the creation of a genetically modified organism in most jurisdictions. And in terms of genome editing, so technically it is a very different case. So genome editing, at the end of the day, first of all, you do not insert really foreign materials into the organism that you're looking at. You're really trying to understand from the genome of your organism itself to see where this kind of change could naturally happen almost, or with, if you want a more classic type of breeding, you could make that change happen. So this means the results you obtain from genome editing, whether it's for generating a new variety of plant or animal, works the same. You could obtain the same kind of results through a more classic breeding program, but also you could expect to have this kind of change happen just in nature. Maybe it takes 100 years, but
Right.
theoretically it could happen. So this is very important and fundamentally different from the creation of a GMO, which is really something that you made artificially and cannot happen in nature. This is not to say that GMO is just bad. I mean, now maybe I will get trolls, on this, but I think most scientists will also agree on this. For me, it's never the fault of a technology. It's only how we humans are using the technology that can create problems. The technology, if we use it correctly, it can always have benefits. We have to watch out for, the kind of the adverse effects a new technology can bring because we don't have frameworks to make it work well, and such is the case of GMO. So that is why today we regulate it so much, because I think in the beginning maybe the legal frameworks were not there to really support the growth of this technology. So
Right.
genetically, genome editing, and today this is why more and more jurisdictions are regulating it completely separately from GMO, because the technique is different, because the results also are quite different, and also because the technology can help us fight so much challenges that we have today. This is why, for example, Japan at the end of 2020 launched the world's first genome edited tomato in the market as a consumer product, and they did
Okay.
excellent communication around it. And actually, the seeds, when they were out, they were sold out, and they were well received by users and consumers in the market. So I think we're looking really at a technology that can do so much for us. And what is important is, as startup companies, to be part of the new framework that is going to come, and make sure that we will do good with it, and
Yeah.
to really minimize the adverse effects that could happen, and participate in creating such framework, whether it's legal frameworks or product or manufacturing frameworks. I
Yeah.
think this has a lot of meaning, and as a startup company, we shouldn't be afraid of that. We should be very excited that we are part of this, and we are an actor that can have an impact on how this new technology could be used by our society.
Yeah.
And this is also what Plantik we want to do. We want to contribute to making the definition of how the technology will be used tomorrow.
Yeah. So the fundamental difference really is that GMOs, classically, you're inserting a foreign material into some sort of plant or animal in some cases. And in your case, in the gene editing, you're essentially accelerating the process that would take place naturally in nature over the course of X many years, evolutionarily.
Yes, or through classic methods, which is also a way to engineer, the genome of a plant or of an animal.
Right.
But you are engineering with less developed tools and with less efficiency, and that's essentially the difference. But the results you could theoretically also get from more classic tools.
And you guys have chosen for your trials a very specific plant to test and apply these new scientific techniques to, which is hemp. And hemp tends to be a somewhat controversial and stigmatized plant. I guess it depends on the region you're in. In France, in particular, and something I've noted when we spoke earlier is that the laws against marijuana production and consumption in France are very strict, although they are one of the biggest producers of hemp in Europe. And so maybe you can talk about the distinction between hemp and CBD and marijuana, and then also why did you choose this plant of all the plants? It seems like it would cause a lot of headaches, but obviously there are some positive aspects as well.
Yeah, you see, in our line of work, we have quite a lot of complex notions and definitions. We need to communicate and educate sometimes people around us, and hemp is another one. So coming from GMO versus genome editing, and I think that the plant we chose also is a complicated one, as you say. But although I think things are changing in the recent years, so why we chose hemp to start with. There are especially two layers. The first one is that the plant has so many potential applications around it, and it presents just massive market opportunities. So, for example, the plant is used in medicinal therapies. That is a sector that is maybe moving the fastest and investing the most in this plant. And the plant is used, the biomass is used, for example, in bioconstruction, like in a more ecological construction, because it's a very good insulation material. The seeds of the plant is naturally very, very rich in protein and in oil content. So consumed, also can be consumed by human, which is underdeveloped, for example. And then different compounds coming from the plant can also be used in well-being products, and also as materials for biofuel, bioplastic. So many things you can do with this plant, which is a really multi-purpose plant, and we think this is the type of plant our society and our economy needs tomorrow. We shouldn't be focusing on using a plant for single use anymore, and we should be looking at versatile multi-purpose plant. And by the way, that is very sustainable in terms of sinking carbon, in terms of using less water and input and all that. And speaking of carbon, for example, 1 hectare of hemp is capable of capturing somewhere between 13 until even 22 is the last number I saw in some studies, tons of CO2, which is massive, which is twice as much as a forest of the same surface. And knowing that hemp is a very short cycled plant, so you can obtain outdoor, depending where you are in the world, but somewhere anywhere between 3 to 6 months, you can already have entire harvest. So it does really kind of tick a lot of the boxes that we're looking for in terms of a sustainable, resilient, and versatile plant that we should be developing more tomorrow. So this is a strong reason for us to look into the the plant, and the other layer is really from a technological point of view. So the plant basically has, well, as you mentioned, mixed with marijuana, which we can talk about what is the difference, for almost a century, which means the scientific and economical development around the plant has been halted for almost a century. And this is
Right.
why, in terms of varieties and in terms of so many applications coming up, we have very limited choice of the good varieties of the plant we can use that's going to be very specific and efficient for each application. That's ultimately what you want, right? And so this means we have a massive opportunity in terms of using the new technology to add value to that plant, compared to a modern crop that already so many resources are behind them, the
Right.
12 biggest crops, as we mentioned
Right.
before. So technically we see it as a good kind of demonstration plant to show what the newer technology can bring and completely revamp a plant where so much needs to be done. And this
Yeah.
is also why we have chosen this plant. And speaking of the difference between hemp, or what we call more in a kind of common language marijuana, or what we call high THC plants, it's really, again, kind of a man-made concept, or man-made differentiation between different plants. So the family of the plant is called Cannabis sativa, and under it you have different branches of plants. They're kind of cousins, but actually at the end of the day they are all coming from the same family. They're very, very similar. And what we call today hemp and high THC plants like marijuana, or people sometimes say medicinal cannabis or all that, ultimately the difference is really concentrated around one single molecule, which is THC molecule. And the THC molecule is the psychoactive molecule in the plant. And traditionally, people think if we use it for recreational purposes, when we say people get high, it's also because of this particular molecule. And artificially, we regulate it that if the plant by dry weight contains a certain amount of the THC content, if it's below the threshold, we call it hemp, industrial hemp. And if it's higher than this threshold, we call it anything, marijuana or recreational cannabis, or medicinal cannabis, or depending on jurisdictions. And this threshold is also man-made. So this threshold is different in different countries. For example, in Europe, currently it's still at 0.2% of THC. In China and the US, it's 0.3%. In Switzerland, it's 1%. So again, it is man-made concepts, and very artificial kind of separation between the plants. This is also why today we work on this plant, and we know that if we look at the genes of the plant, the genome of the plant, they're very, very similar. So scientifically, we make a difference, but it's not so kind of harsh between the plants as we do from a legal point of view.
Gotcha. So if we walk back a few layers here, like the initial vision mission that you articulated before was to build the infrastructure for future plant geneticists and scientists to essentially create, I would assume through a database, can input a number of factors that are important to the region that they're going to be growing the plant. And there might be uncertainty in the future around where you're growing plants and climate disaster, that kind of thing. So you've got that long-term vision, and obviously that's a long time horizon. In the meantime, you're applying the skill sets from your partner around gene editing to the hemp plant, because it's the most diverse and versatile in terms of applications and the experimentation that you can do. But the ultimate goal, I want to talk about a scenario, and this is kind of a good closing point. A scenario 20 years from now, I'm a plant scientist in Morocco or South Africa or Central America. What is my experience or interaction with your tool? Is it a hardware and a software combination? I'm imagining some sort of kind of magical device next to me that I code in a couple of factors that are important for the hemp plant I want to grow, and the seasonality and the temperature, et cetera. And then all of a sudden the seed pops out and I can go test this. Can you give me like what you imagine this might look like 10 or 20 years from now?
Yeah, it's a great question. We imagine that in 20 years, which is a long time, we might be imagining things not bold enough for 20 years. But if you are a plant engineer in 20 years, we want to be able to give you all the tools you need to create, that plant you're looking for, whether it's for, really cleaning the air, or it's for some kind of superfood, or it's for really fighting some irrigation disaster in the region that you're working at. And how we want to help you is that first of all, if you have a starting point of a plant that you want to change for the purpose, we want to be able to build a genome discovery database around your plant for you. So what you use it for is that you're trying to understand in my plant, what is the element or elements that are the most relevant for the specific trait or traits that I'm looking for in my plant, because you need to establish that kind of link so that you can create your plant much faster. We can imagine that this is the same today. You're coding a software to be like that and doing this particular job, and you can imagine it and you code it, and tomorrow you need to code your plant. So first you need to understand what I'm dealing with, and then you try to understand, okay, which pieces of the puzzle I can change and in what way. So the system helps you to find your targets, and then it can also kind of predict what scenarios would happen if you change certain pieces in your big plant genomic puzzle. And from there you can go on to do your genome editing experiments with the targets. So we design kind of the hardware piece almost also can be produced so that you use in your genome editing workflow. And from there, how you edit is also another question. You have different protocols that you could follow. We want to be able to suggest you the best one, depending on the plant you're working with, depending on the task you are taking. So we give you that input as well. So you choose the best kind of protocol to also transform your plant and obtain the final plant that you really want. And from there, every step of the way, we're there to give you the kind of the best tools and best advice. Once you obtain the plant, we want to be able to tell you, okay, now you need to kind of stabilize the plant as well, so that you're sure it's not altered after generations, and so that we want to be able to give you kind of a guideline as well, how to stabilize it, maybe under specific light and temperature settings. It will make you obtain your plant even faster. So you really imagine it as kind of a very complete toolbox, and you take what you need. And we want to be able to kind of provide that agile toolbox kind of setting, and you take what you need. So this is how we imagine people would use our tools in the time to come.
Yeah, that's amazing. Just deciding about a few to be the region we're in, serving for new value, for choose for. It sounds in line with around change. Hopefully we don't disaster 20 years hence, but event that we do, I would imagine that Plantik will be around getting food shortages. Amazing work you guys are doing, and it was really a pleasure to speak with you for sharing. Obviously, we'll be in touch. Looking forward to seeing this progress over the next couple of years.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the chat. I really enjoyed it, and I'm happy to chat for more. And thanks for having me today.